Welcome, dear hearts. This week I have a very wonderful guest joining us. She is Julie Dhara Roberts. She is a celestial shaman, and for me, she is a modern day Ariadne. She is a bridge that assists us to come to a place of understanding the synchronicities and the alignments within the stars and the planets, and to bring all of this information as an interpreter of all these light codes so that we come to a place inside of understanding the celestial realms within ourselves. So she is a huge light at this time, sharing fresh and new perspectives that are here to assist us to expand in consciousness. So thank you so much, Julie, for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Oh, thanks so much, Lois. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I spoke about Ariadne in the introduction because for me, there's so many starry alignments and happenings within the myth of her that it comes in beautifully with you. And for me, one of the most famous parts of the myth with her is that she had this red ball of thread, and she gave this red ball to Theseus so that he could find his way out of the labyrinth. So for me, this is what you're doing for us in your work. You're linking up this thread to the celestial realms so that we begin to understand these other alignments that are happening within our skies, but you're bringing it inside of us so that we can start to recognize what we feel about these alignments. How does it feel for us inside in our realities? And so this is a huge bridge of communication that you're opening up within us through your work. And I just think it is really beautiful because you're bringing something. You're not going for the usual alignments. You discover these planets and stars that I had no idea existed. You're opening up, by opening up the celestial realms for us with your understanding and your interpretation, you're opening up the celestial realms and the consciousness within us too by doing that. So it's very, very beautiful.
Sweet, thank you so much. Can you say that name again? I'm not familiar with that myth. Ariadne?
Ariadne.
You spell it?
Yes, Ariadne. There's lots of stories about her and varying myths about her. But at some point, she married the god Dionysus, and she was given this crown as a wedding gift. And she tossed the crown into the heavens, and it became the Corona Borealis constellation in the sky. So it's like, again, with you, it's this wisdom, our star connection. And like
Sweet,
all these,
go and have a look.
Because
in the Greek mythology?
In the Greek mythology.
Okay, cool.
Because it's really magical. I love anything mythological. I love it. I'll go out, it's beautiful. And to see as well the hidden messages within those myths as well, which is beautiful. But let's take you to the beginning of your journey as a child. I wanted to ask you, were you fascinated by the stars then? Was the connection there then for you?
For sure. I always had I would just get this like I was a child. I would get this childlike excitement just anytime anytime I was like anything space, anything like exploration, anything space was always like a thing. So if you ask me from when I was in kindergarten or whatever on, it's like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And my answer was always astronaut. I was just like, I have to get to the stars. and I didn't really change that until I really figured out what astronauts' lives are like. I was like, oh no, I don't really want to do that.
And you went on and you studied. This is a big mouthful for me. So aerospace
I
engineering.
did get so I was always good at math and science in school, and was really interested in that. And then I figured that back on that, like the space quest, my internal space quest, I was like, oh, when I do the aptitude tests and stuff for going through university, it would always come through, and that was like aerospace engineer, and I was like, oh, that seems cool. So I did get a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering, and that's probably when I figured out that that was not exactly what I wanted to do, because it's mostly here in this country is more, working for the government and defense and warfare, and like that's like Air Force and all that stuff. And I was like, oh that wasn't quite where I wanted to take myself. So,
and but the next phase that you went into is again reflecting back to me this bridge that you have become. So you were investigating the outer realms, the celestial realms, through your work and your interest. And then yoga comes in to change your whole perspective from looking outside and going within. And sort of you discovering your inner cosmos.
Yeah, and I think, like maybe many folks in their 20s, like I wasn't really focused on I was focused on self-discovery, but I didn't have like the big picture of things, right? Yes. I was still in the like self-exploration. But I did take up yoga just for my own. I did end up not completing my engineering degree in the 4-year cycle that's traditional, and because of certain things that were happening in the social things that were happening, warfare and that kind of thing, and I just became disenchanted. But then I came back when I wanted to finish my bachelor's degree, university degree. I was working full time and commuting about an hour to go to the classes in Boston, and that's when I found yoga. So that like it wasn't really it was more self-preservation and like self-exploration, or just like de-stress action. But then when I found yoga, for sure, I just remember one time I was at a class, and the woman had it in her living room and like the front porch, and I had this moment where I like was in pigeon pose, and I lifted up my arms, and there was a pigeon on the stoop that also like flapped its wings at the same time I was like making the move. And like I had this very, that the yoga is like the transcendent, like figuring out that you're one with the universe, really. And that moment, and then I had all this, I did complete my engineering degree, and I got what seemed to me like my dream job in engineering, because it was with an ecological engineering. So I was working with wash water gardens and water conservation, water cleanup, composting toilets, like using the engineering to like help the earth kind of thing. And I was also teaching yoga part-time. I was doing both. And then I just had this like, I wanted to be away from computers and away from spreadsheets, and I just had this like that calling, a soul calling was to like, I would hear about people opening yoga studios or teaching yoga full time. And I was like, you could do that? Like you could like do that as like a job? So that like was a soul calling so I did, ended up quitting my dream job in engineering and started teaching yoga all around town. And then fast forward a few years from that, I opened a yoga studio and ran a yoga studio for 12 years. That was like midlife career, if you will.
Yes. And so then how did the process of coming to create your website and your creation, your
space? Yeah. I was just actually reflecting on this, because so I have a center here in Massachusetts called Inner Space. So my yoga studio, the name of it was Flow Forms, which Flow Forms is a way to clean water. It's like move your body through a series of movements and you come out purified. That was my thing. So a lot of us had 2012 wake-up calls or shifts of soul callings. And there was a few different factors. Partially, I wanted to have another child. earth plane child. And it was too much, like running the center to like have a second kid. And there was just a few different factors. And then it was also, I was having a lot of dreams about moving on. And it was just, I had my soul sister and business partner, and I sort of looked at each other one day and we were like, we just really don't want to do this anymore. Like, so I had, I felt like I was teaching other people's content or teaching other people's, you know, that lineage based things. And I was sort of like teaching in the loop. And I taught a course, an immersion course that was called Awake, Aware, and Alive. And it was working through the senses and, the Mahabhutas, like the great, you know, the elements, and working, not really a yoga teacher training, but like immerse yourself in this body of knowledge. And I taught it through the 5 elements. And the last one, with working with the Akash, with the ether, was called Inner Space, is the title of my weekend immersion. And my partner and I had kind of gifted our yoga studio to the woman who was managing it for us. And that we were going to sort of like work for her and sort of do things. So that just didn't quite work out. But it was like, you know, you try to have your feet in one world or 2 different worlds at the same time. And the universe is like, you can't, you need to move on. But I'm actually going on my 8th year. So December 8th this year is going to be Inner Space's 8th birthday, which is a lot of 8s. But that last weekend of the immersion that I taught was like, I felt like, you know, when you come to a culmination, it was like the best immersion workshop, integrated course material. And it was really like kind of like a shamanic, and it wasn't totally, but I always taught like connecting, even in like the context of a yoga class, it was always like connecting sun, moon, and earth, like using your body as a conduit through, or your energy field. And yeah, I really wanted to work. I also, in addition to teaching yoga classes, I've trained in a style of energy balancing, energy healing, and I wanted to work with people more one-on-one, and it just worked better for a mom of small kids to not be like, oh, every Saturday morning at 8:30 I'll show up for yoga classes, you know, and teach and all that. So is that the answer? It's kind of a long,
absolutely.
answer,
but that's like beautiful.
Yeah, then I liberated myself from holding space for the whole community, which is such a blessing. Like I love, and if anyone is watching this, that was part of my community, and that ends up watching this, it's like, it was one of the best times of our, you know, that part was amazing. But it was also had a lot of this, you know, any of these lineage based guru model lineage spiritual practices they're like in this loop, right? If we might call them like a 4D looping model, right? And it's like, oh, I just had to really like pull myself out of that completely and do it differently.
Wow.
So then I opened Inner Space, and I was working one-on-one with people and doing energy healing / energy aligning, chakra balancing, hands-on body work. Do you know much? Are you familiar with? Do you know Ayurveda?
Yes. I don't know Ayurveda, no, but I used to do.
So it's the sister science. Ayurveda is the sister science of yoga. It's the science of life. So it's basically like yoga and Ayurveda are teammates.
Linked. Okay.
And Ayurveda is more I won't say shamanic, but it like focuses on the 5 elements and what your constitution is, and like how your body is built and your energy field is built, and it's like the living lifestyle practices that go along with yoga.
Okay.
But there's a section of Ayurveda. There's a lot of the stuff that we might consider the cosmic sort of new age. You know, it does all go back to the Vedas and to yoga. Like the ancient yoga masters were really working with the light body, like really working with star essences. You know, they would work with, have you heard of the Vimana? No. Vimana is like the chariot, almost like the, you know, they just like the Native Americans here in the continent where I live on, talk about the star elders. Yes. The ancient yogis would talk about, you know, people descending from the sky on starships, chariots, in vessels. Yes. And like they had this, the Vimanas are like light body starships from the ancient Vedic lore, like quite detailed. You know, they have a lot of, you know, like that engineering part. So yoga got really interesting for me when the cosmology, the yoga, the physical yoga that you do, the asanas, the warrior and the pigeon and all, down dog, is to prepare the vessel of the body so you can receive a higher download of whatever you want to call it, energy, prana, light, force. And it's like a purification system. So I think for a lot of it, we do yoga for a period of time, and then it's like, not that it doesn't still help, I don't mean graduated, but you kind of graduate from it, and then it's like, oh, then you're in that oneness field, getting to that unity place. Yeah. And then you see more from it's like a global perspective, but then you can expand to see like from the solar system perspective, and then from the cosmic perspective, the galactic perspective. But a lot of the more you dive into yoga philosophy, the more cosmological it gets, the more galactic.
Really? I'd never known that was linked into all of that.
It's not. It's kind of like a subset of it. And it's certainly, I don't know what it's like in Singapore, but here, I feel like I got out of yoga just in time, because it was, when I was teaching yoga and had a yoga studio, it wasn't, now it's just like heat the room and move your body and sweat. And like, it's all like, that's kind of the fashion now. It's like the power yoga, the hot yoga, and which is all well and good. It's just not it's just a different vein, shall we say. It's not like really trying to like merge into the state of oneness with the cosmos.
Wow. That's so interesting. Yes, it does.
But I'm saying you can't walk into like any yoga studio on the corner and like expect cosmological stuff. But anyone who's gone deep into the philosophy would know, that the Vedas are all the stuff we would want to know about the light body, the tantras, the tantric sutras. There's one that I've been, you and I both work with Antares, but one of the offerings I want to do is that there's a whole body of work, a tantric text called the Radiance Sutras, and it's really about the light body. And so a lot of my Antares are paired up with these, like the different sutras, and they want to kind of like co-teach a little, or not teach but they want to offer like vibrational transmissions with the sutras.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
But it's the most beautiful, because there actually are, I think we think like we're inventing the wheel when it comes to like light body activity, and it is, but it's like you go back to any ancient culture, and whether it's through Egypt, whether it's through Peru, or if you go to the Himalayan region.
I just feel that the wealth of experiences we chose to gain here at this time is, I love the variety of how we all choose to experience it. So there is this ancient cellular memory that we can access. There is this ancient text that we can get hold of that will point us into that direction. But I also feel like we are given an opportunity to bring something a little different, to make it something unique again, so it's like we can bring all those things in, and we have an opportunity to bring a little of our own flavor into it as well, to
absolutely, it's like
light it up.
Like we're rewriting the books, or rewriting the scriptures, or the Veda, like we're in modern.
So like for you, gaining that remembrance with the perspective and the expansion with the yoga knowledge and wisdom that you were tapping into and researching and finding, and then for me it was actually crystals doing the same work for me to raise my frequency, the physical body's frequency, for a really long time, because I was so dense. And so that's how, so it would be the same thing, but we are choosing different experiences to move through, to expand and raise our frequencies. So it's just really beautiful, the uniqueness that we can choose in each of our journeys. I love it. It's so beautiful, and it's continually reminding me, don't even think about getting stuck in, that's the only way, you can only do it this way, because it's so expansive and it's beautiful. But thank goodness for those ancient wisdoms and knowledges, just to remind us again, yes, it's not new. It's our ancestors knew all about this. We just chose a veil of forgetfulness, and now we're choosing to remember again. And so this is a really exciting time in that transformation for us. You wrote a really beautiful article a month ago. I always get excited when I see your posts, because I know what she discovered, what she's going to share, because it's something new, and it makes me look and understand in a new way, in a different way, and keeps expanding me, and I love that. And you wrote about stargates and star light codes and solar codes in a really lovely, clear, concise way, so that we can see, what is a stargate? How does it work? What would we expect to experience? How do you experience it? What is star codes? How is that different to solar codes? And I just thought, I don't know if you'd be happy to explore that a little bit more, sharing your own experiences about that and what that feels like to you when you are receiving these codes and interpreting them.
Sure. Yeah, that's a sweet, sweet topic. So I feel like I should. So I said that like in the 2012 I started the Inner Space, and then like I feel like anyone who came here to work with me, because that was back before the days of like Zoom and Connect. You know, I was like, I have like a bricks and mortar place where people would come in and like lay on my table and we'd explore that way. But it's so nice to be that technology has gathered us globally too.
Yes.
But in this time for me, that like 2016 was a pretty big internal awakening for me for some of this knowledge. So I was working with it, and then I was like exploring a lot deeper okay, so you could tell, like, so I was saying that I was doing some Ayurvedic body work and like moving, like an acupuncturist would work with the meridians and do acupressure. In the Ayurveda, it's nadis, and it's marma pressure. Marma points are they're different, but they're similar-ish to acupuncture points. But working with that and chakras and sound like do a lot of sound toning, and I started gathering my collection of sound healing instruments, sound tuning instruments. And then I had this, like, I'd have people here in the space, and I built an octagon of rainbow silks that would come down, and I had my table inside of that because I had just seen it in my visions. And I was like, I could, I was so lucky to have a lot of yoga students and friends who were gifted in the silk. So I had someone dye the silks, like she bought a ream of silks and dyed them for me and cut them to length. So I have this, it's like hanging from my ceiling, and they're drapes basically. But I have to work with the rainbow light body and with the chakras. And it had this flow, it just like being in the grid, this octagonal grid would work with rainbow light body. So I had this strong just inner exploration of like, okay, so where does prana come from, right? Like where we're working with this prana, like what is, even deeper, like a Yoda, like what's the force? What is the force? What is life force? What is prana? And then to me it was like, it comes from the sun. And I had this beautiful, I'm lucky to have a window that faces south, and light would stream in at certain times of the day, and I'd have clients on the grid, and I have prisms, and I started to really get, download isn't the right word. I really started to communicate with the sun and bring the sun in to the work. And in 2016, I had this call and awakening to like the body of work that is grid work. Like I don't think I'd really heard of that before, like planetary grid work or grid keeping. And so I started really exploring, and some people are, taking some training classes and deepening knowledge base and really working with that. And I have and then in the course of doing grid work training, we were to choose a site that is nearby to us, like a local site. And I just, in my head, I always think like, oh, it's like Stonehenge or Newgrange or the pyramids, or I didn't really think I had one in my backyard, but it turns out I do. And a couple miles from my house, at one of these ancient stone chambers, that's an archaeoastronomy like calendar site. So I have to credit that and attribute my like awakening to some of this ancient knowledge, just really working with this site and being open to it. But it really does act like a Stargate. So when I pulled in, my daughter, who's about to turn 7, was like 1.5, still like, which is bad environmental to say, but we have maybe all parents here in the United States do like the nappy loop where you just go for a nice ride and they fall asleep in the back of the car. It's a little waste of gas, but that's what we do.
Yes.
Instead of the pram or pushing. But that was like, I was on a nappy loop with her in the back, and I would do a lot of like working with the land and like really, because I know that for myself, like I've been doing grid work my whole life. I just didn't really realize that I was, like, not consciously.
Exactly.
Right? For a lot of people too. Like once you realize like, oh, this is anyone who's called to protect the earth, work with the earth, interact with the earth, want the earth to be doing well, want the earth to be earth and all of its inhabitants, that call that we all feel with the soul call. It's like, anyway, I pulled into the site and she was asleep in the back, and I just had this like, this is a Stargate. And I really didn't know what that meant. And I was like, okay. You just kind of like things drop into your consciousness, and you're like, and then it might take a year or 2 years to unpack whatever that means. This is a long answer to your question, but
no, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's
because perfect. It's not like, there wasn't a university course on Stargates, no. Right? Not yet, anyway. But it did like this. I feel like giving myself the liberation to really dive into being with people in their energy fields, because to connect with the planetary energy grids, like first you need to, the dial or the gateway in, or the operating system of it is your own human form, right? Mm-hmm. That's why for me, like the yoga or whatever people's, like you could be a marathon runner, or you could do Tai Chi, or you could, there's Qigong, like there's many pathways in, or crystals, it's like, it doesn't have to just be yoga. That was mine. But it's like once you awaken and really like get in touch with and like clear your own personal field, that's how you get all the knowledge, is all through your sensory input. So anyway, this place was like Stargate. So luckily there have been other archaeologists and other people that identified that site, and there was several books written about it. So I was just reading it. It was just like, that was that whole summer and into the fall. I was just like, all right, I'm buying every book I can find on this chamber. It's a beehive stone chamber that has a long, like a 14-foot tunnel that is aligned to a hill across the way where the Pleiades set. And there's a lot of other stars. At the top of this hill, there's a lot of other stone cairns, stone alignment things that they found they think it was built in the 700s-ish. So anyway, like researching about this chamber and just going there and being in a open state, meditative state, just like I would go, anytime I felt the soul calling, I would just go and sit there and sit by the water there, or sit on the land there, and just like be there. So I really feel like being a respectful, like a listener at the site, if that makes sense, really is how I got a lot of this knowledge come through.
You're making me think now about again, because our physical body is designed and created. We are connected with the earth in every way, and it is mind-blowing, the expansions that keep coming about our connection with the earth, and of course with the whole cosmos. It's inside. But you're making me think again about going back to the Grecian things and to Welsh myths too, because there's Prometheus and Zeus creating man out of clay. And I know Sandra Walters spoke about this recently in one of her courses or one of her videos. She was reminding us again to remember our connection, that the myth itself is a story of our creation, our physical body creation, this version of it. And in Welsh myths, I'm only linking it up because for you, I can see you sitting there quietly with this, in this sacred site, and how it's connecting you within yourself to all of it as well, and this deeper connection that we have to the earth itself, because she's within us, and how awesome that is. In a Welsh myth, there's a story about Blodeuwedd, and she is a woman that's created out of flowers. And the myth has a bit of it's got a bit of a slant that I was never completely at ease with, because it's about this woman that was created for a man by a wizard, and he created the most exquisite woman possible, but she was wild because she was of nature, and so she was created for this man, and it was never really fully fulfilled because she was free, and so she left him, and other things happened. She transforms into an owl, which is wisdom and everything. But linking to the Grecian myths and this, and looking at, oh my goodness, this is talking about the creation of this physical vessel again, but in a really, veiled way. Yes, I'm sorry, I just went off on a tangent, but
No, it's beautiful.
But it's just so linked with us and our connection to Gaia, and we had no idea. And these sacred moments happen when you're sitting there and connecting so deeply. And it was always there, waiting for you, and you were there in perfect alignment. And again, looking at since looking at your articles, and gaining a greater level of awareness or sensitivity maybe to things that I wasn't aware of before. It's just, anyway, I could go on and on, but
this sacred site, or the stone chamber that I communed with, I found in 2017, and then it spent a few years. It rekindled my love of stars. Let's go back to, because it was this whole archaeoastronomy and how the ancients would build structures. Like we've got our phones with our sky apps and our compasses and what, but back, like, there was a whole body of, like I was saying, like some of the shamans or some of the people, like their job was to keep track of the stars, be it either in Machu Picchu or like Temple of the Sun in Mexico City, or like all over the globe. There were I kept hearing the term geomancer. There's like people that would work with the earth and the stars, like the celestial realms. And is it just keeping time? Yes. Is it just like, oh, this is a good time to plant crops? Or, for the Mediterranean seafaring traditions, it would, like, they'd use certain stellar alignments to say, like, okay, it's time we can get back out on the ocean again, right? It's spring. It's like they were their calendar sites, but so much more. It was like they were receiving star information, but also transmitting back, and it was like a communication stream. So like I said, I was grabbing anything I could on this particular site, and then it just kind of opened up this whole how the indigenous cultures here in North America communed with the earth and with the star elders and this whole, and I was like, oh, and then it really brought back my love that, because the first question you asked me about my love of astronomy and the love of the lore, and then I was like, wait a minute, I knew it lit me up. And so the first time I maybe shared an article, I think was a couple of years later, maybe in 2019, I think, I had to, I don't do things and then share about them like the next week. Like I let things like percolate for me and inside, and like the learning really, because I want to really embody something and imbibe with it before I share it back out. And the first time I shared about this chamber, I had all these like connections with people and the concept of like, oh, these things that like I geek out on, these star things and these alignments, like other people want to hear about that. That was like a really cool, I was like, oh, like I could share this and like people want to hear, like, well, that's really fun. Like that's a thing I could do. And so I've been encouraging myself to do it more and more over the last whatever year this is, 2021. So like I think my first sharing was in 2019 about like alignments and star things, and I was like, oh, well, this is like super, super fun. It's like, that soul thing of like,
yeah.
And then been working with the Antares in conjunction with all this work, like, just like the rocks, the stones are the record keepers here on Earth, on Gaia, right? Like you can just go to a stone and like be with it, and it just it unfolds. The Antares work that way for me too, of like, especially with the stellar connections, and like, what does Lisa Brown say? Like just to travel by light.
Yes.
Like the Antares are kind of like a fast track to talking with the stars for me. They're like, oh, when I put those two together, I was like that, that awakening for me was ginormous. And so now to pass that along and to, guide or mentor others as they want to make these connections for themselves is like my like greatest soul fun.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, Julie.
And like people pay me to do that. That's like, really? All right. Well, that's the best thing ever. But we deserve that. Like it's what we do, right? It's like,
yeah.
I was like, I would just do this for fun just because I love it so much. But it's also it all takes, the websites and the platforms and all that,
Can you just, because I loved hearing about Speaker. You put a little article on, a post a few weeks ago about Speaker. That really spoke to me deeply. There was, and it was the second time I'd heard the name. Somebody had mentioned the name Speaker before, and then your article came through. And because you mentioned there was unity consciousness, there was an understanding about unity consciousness, I think, about it. There was this connection with the Star of Bethlehem, and I just thought it's just magical because it's opening up really beautiful. And it's this really quiet, unheard of planet. It's not like a star. It's not like these big alignments that we get used to. Get ready for this. This is going to happen at this, blah, blah, blah. So that was really profound for me because it was such a little, just this light that I'd never heard of.
Cool. I know. I feel like, so I should answer. I never answered your question about the star codes and solar codes, because it will help, I think, build to that. So I was telling you, I was working here at Innerspace and working with people in my rainbow grid and working with the sun and the codes. Solar codes we're all familiar with. To me, they come in the rainbow spectrum, right? Like how our chakra system, we are the crystal, we are the prism, and sunlight has so much content to it that we can't really unpack it all in our human form. So it gets diffracted into the rainbow, right? Into the red, orange, yellow, green. And we can take in we can digest the red codes and then the orange codes. It's we kind of need them as piecemeal because it's just so magnanimous all at once, right? So that is true. And I think we're all familiar with working with our sun and light codes that come from the sun. So star codes are same. They're just like not Solaris, not the sun that our Earth orbits around. It's like we're connecting with other star systems. And they come through more subtly in some ways, because the sun is just like, it's got the heat, warmth, we're close to it. It's the basis of all life on Earth, the photosynthesis of the plants and how we eat and how we survive. And that like cycle of life is so embedded in the sun. To talk with other star systems is just working with a more subtle skill set, if you will, or like it's because it's a whole different coding, to like talk with or to interact with Spica or Betelgeuse or Rigel or, any of the other stars. So
you feel them inside? Is it a different experience?
I guess I get pinged to pay attention to where the things are. Like, I feel like what we can see in the night sky is just a thing for me. That's just like I was like, oh, right now here where I live, it's Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter are like the governing things. That most people look at the stars between, dinner time and midnight, say, right? So not everyone gets up at the wee hours to see. But so it's like the prime times of star coding viewing are the, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. time. And so whatever's in the sky at that time is kind of the guiding light, if you will, for the celestial alignments. But there are some big things like eclipses or different other alignments, new moons, full moon, like different alignments to pay attention to. So like the more I pay attention to it, the more information I'll get. So it's like a feedback loop.
Yeah.
So you asked about Spica. So last year, so I can say that, both you and I have like the same mentor with Lisa Brown.
Yes.
We spent we're in her
inner
circle or membership group. It's like,
yes.
Yeah. So remember a couple of years ago, she would talk about, and Sandra Walter talks about this too, about tuning in at the end of the year, tuning in for what does the year look like? So 2 years ago, I was like, oh, I'm going to do that for the celestial sphere, for looking, what are the star alignments? And last December, I've been doing that for several years. And last December, January, when I did that for myself, I just got you need to be paying attention to the planets. It's the planetary coding this year for 2021 was the thing that I was guided to gatekeep or pay attention to. And the year prior to that, there was a big Venus Pleiades conjunction. I don't know if you remember, Venus went into the Pleiades and lit it up like a diamond. And that was a big activation. That was March 2020, which was is a pretty big global moment for other reasons too. So I don't know what those two have to do with each other, but I was talking about the Venus and Pleiades was like a diamond, and we were all going to get squoze. That's not a word, but there's how how does coal turn to diamond?
Yes.
It's squeeze.
Yes.
And people would ask me what do you think this means? And I was like, I don't know, but we're just going to get this big squeeze. But I had no idea that was going to come as global shutdowns and all, but squeezed we got. Squeezed we are in. And we're still in the squeeze. But
it's
this year,
perfect in that simplicity, perfectly showing us what's going on.
And people say oh, is it Venus's, these we're not attributing supernatural powers to planets yet. For cultures, the time memoriam, the myths are there for a reason, right? Because people would pay attention to the governing bodies. And so anyway, the squeeze, the Venus Pleiades squeeze happened March 2020. And this year in March, Mars was in the Pleiades at that same time in the spring. So just for me as a celestial geek / shaman, if you want to call it that, someone who pays attention to the stars, I just spend some of my connecting in time, like looking at alignments and looking at things. So I was just watching where all the planets. So I, for myself, made this chart of, or this listing, and it's on my website for people too, of like what alignments are coming when. I was like, oh, that's my highest service right now to, my light family. Because if I'm like willing to geek out and pay attention to all these things, and I can provide that content to other people who might care, that's my service role right now. And so paying attention to the sun, the solar alignments with the planets, because a lot of different, January was Jupiter, and then we had the big conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn last December. Do you remember that one? That was like a big... I remember
that one, yes.
So since then, I was just like, okay, how do the planetary bodies were showing me that like they'll come near each other and like cross code, kind of like we use the Andaras. Sometimes you like use a team of Andaras, like the planets work that way too. It's like, oh, the pink Venus wants to come next to the fiery Mars. And so I was just paying attention to all of that. And that's how Spica came into my awareness field. So it's a star in the constellation of Virgo, but I myself have never paid attention to it until August either. It's there, but it was just because of how a lot of the planetary, like Mars and Venus, were meeting up near it, and I think a lot of us, Arcturus. So if Venus was the goddess standing, like one of her hands would be Spica, and the other hand would be Arcturus. Oh. So like they're both in that constellation, even though Arcturus is in Arcturus, like other constellation, but they're in the sky, like kind of across as her limbs, if you will. So I was watching. Part of what I'm called to do, and I don't even necessarily share about this in any of my articles or sharing, is just like there are these certain places, and you said you follow Sandra Walter's work. She talks about like the Stargates, how there's like these moments, celestial moments where things kind of like click open. So what I was watching is like Arcturus is here in the sky, Spica is here, and like planets would come, and like when they got right between Spica and Arcturus, there would be like, to me, there's just this like click opening is the best way I can describe it. It's like, so Stargates are that. Gateways are like, if we talk about them in computer coding language, like gateways are like hubs, or how information flows to us. So star codes they come through sound, they come through light, they come through energy. It's like multidimensional too. Yes. But I feel like there are these moments where things just kind of click in, and we get bombarded with light codes, star codes, information, content. So for it, some of us, it'll come from dreams. Some people will tone it through. Some people, you can interpretive dance it through. You can like get out there and with a drum on a fire pit, bring it through. There's no right or wrong way to bring it through. It's all unique expression, right? But and then it's cool to listen, like you can hear a bunch of different of us that are paying attention to this stuff, like light workers, gatekeepers, gridkeepers, will have the same star codes are flowing. We just all interpret them a slightly different way. But then I can hear like, oh, Lois had it as like her, whatever. She built this Shekinah set with the blah, blah, blah. That's happening under the Venus alignment. I was like, oh, she's getting the same intel. It's just like how you bring it through in your words and your tools and your things. But it's like, there's such a resonance, right? I think you and I have done that so many times. Like we'll hear the same intel is coming through to each of us individually, and then it's like, oh, cool, look, like our buddy Samantha's doing this thing, and like our buddy Corey's doing that thing, and like Lois is doing this thing, and Marissa's doing that. We're all like the friends that code together. It's like we'll recognize the same codes coming through in different people's work.
Yes.
All right, so back to Spica. So that like it was shown to me like that was very active. So the eclipses want to come through first. So we had a June 10th solar eclipse, which really like sparked a lot of this year's activity, like what was the solar activity and star activity. And we're having the bookend of that December 4th, in a few days from now, really, a week or so. So we have another solar eclipse coming. And in the middle of that, Mars, Mercury, and Venus all passed by the star Spica and just did some various like cross-coding with it.
Okay.
So that was what prompted the sharing of that, and the Spica had a.
Okay. Oh my God, it's vast.
It is, right?
But it's so beautiful. And it's such a, it's just beautiful. It's beautiful. I love also to interpret. I know it's simplistic, but it's kind of a nice way to feel into my reality. Oh, here we are. Shooting stars just come through and it's just coming in to share a little light and share our encodements, and then it's moving through. So it might be somebody who's just come in fleetingly and then gone out of my reality, and to start looking at everything from that perspective. Okay, so my family are here on the same planet as me at this time, but then we might be moving and jumping onto other planets to experience different things, or it's just. But I love the freshness and the new perspective that you bring through in your interpretation. What alignments and happenings within the celestial realms that are getting you excited about, or are you seeing at the moment that are really interesting you?
This last few weeks has been really about the eclipse corridor for me. And it's like full eclipse action. But that was last week was the lunar eclipse. And then the so where the eclipse is, or where the things happen in the sky, and what celestial bodies they're neighboring to, is something that I'm shown to pay a lot of attention to. Right? So where the moon was when it eclipsed, when it was full and when it was eclipsed, was near the Pleiades. And it was in the Taurus constellation. So it was near Aldebaran and the Pleiades. So that was really a whole cool thing to gatekeep with and to pay attention to. And we've moved kind of through that, but I think you were asking like for the upcoming times, right?
You speak about
anything I could talk about. What is exciting me? I was like, I could say but I was just before we got together today, I was like, okay, so where's the sun? So I said December 4th is the solar eclipse. And the eclipse that happened in June, that solar eclipse, so the lunar eclipse have a vast swath of the planet that is in the shadow. The solar eclipses are much more pinpointed, and the solar eclipse pathways are very narrow windows of where you can see the full total solar eclipse. So the one that happened in June started in Canada and moved across the North Pole and like over to Siberia, Russia zone, that pathway. The one that's coming in December, in a week or so, is starting like in the southern Atlantic Ocean and moving across, like it's just the tip of the South Pole across Antarctica. And the only visible places I was just looking up is the very tip of South America, a little bit, mostly Antarctica is for totality. We'd have to be down there to see it fully. But partial eclipse viewing is the tip of South America, South Africa, and South Australia. I was looking to see if you were in it, and Singapore, like you're not getting a view from Singapore, but that like completion of like that North Pole, South Pole, so eclipses have a huge effect on us as a globe, as a planet, and as a species, and then the path where the energy grids, like where the eclipse path happens.
Yes.
The way that the temperature changes, the ionosphere changes, it's like hitting a reset button on the grids there. Absolutely. So this North and South Pole thing, it's like we're completing the cycle that we started in June. And it's, we've had a lot of this magnetic body, our own magnetics are shifting, magnetics of the planets are shifting. So I'm paying a lot of attention to that right now, the magnetic polar quality of the eclipse cycle. But I did go and look. Should we stop with that?
No, you carry on.
I did go and look. I was like, so in addition to that, that's happening. But so where is the sun going to be on the celestial sphere? Where is the sun going to be in the sky this time when it eclipses? And it's going to be right near Antares, the heart of the Scorpio. The Scorpio. So when you talked about that, that's why I wrote, I don't know how did you pronounce that? The myth?
Ariadne. Ariadne.
But when you said that, I was like, it sounds like Antares.
Antares. And see, I've been seeing the word Antares, and but I'm lazy, Julie. I didn't go and look, and so here you are making that connection for me, which is absolutely.
You've been seeing the Antares. So the Antares is it's a huge. I know I kind of didn't on purpose wear this color. It's just really cold here today, but it's a really bright orange star. It's one of the largest stars. This cool fact I read today is that if we put Antares into where our sun is, the sphere of it would go out past, we'd be in it right now. It would go out past Mars, the orbit of Mars. It's like 650 times larger than, billion times larger than our sun. So it's just this huge, it's one of the hugest stars that we know of. Wow. And it has some myths that go back to, it's interesting. It's right across the sky from Orion. So you're a mythology lady. Yeah. So it goes, they talk about the scorpion. So Antares, it means like not Mars, or Antares. Teres was the Mars in Greece. So because they're both, how Mars has the reddish orange color in the sky, so does Antares. So I think they would, people would say oh, that's the other red. It's basically saying that's the other red one, not Mars. So that's how it got its name, Antares, not Mars. But it also has a cross-coding quality with Mars. It's like the anti-Mars, if you will. I don't know whatever that means. That's what. But the mythology of it is that the scorpion, Orion, the hunter, was trying to kill everything, all of the species on Earth. And so one of the, I forget which, Zeus maybe, or one of the big gods, sent the scorpion to go stop Orion. And he stopped Orion, but then they made them both stars up in the sky. But they put them across from each other, so they're always going after each other. So it's the antagonist of Orion. But then when I was reading that today, did you read recently that in Egypt, I forget if it was because of the drought or because of the floods, that all those scorpions came out in Egypt really recently?
No, I didn't.
I'll have to go dive into that a little bit more. And I was like, okay. Oh, it's all so the mythology of Antares in Egyptian lore is Sekhmet?
Yes.
I don't know how to say that. And
yes.
She had the headdress of the scorpion, and there's a scorpion situation happening, which of course, this is, if you talk to an astrologer, we're in that Scorpio season.
Yeah.
But the solar eclipse, first, the sun comes in. So if Antares is here, the sun moves to it, and then it's conjuncting Mercury. So the sun, Antares, Mercury, and the sun are going to be in a line November 29th. That's pretty soon, right? Next week, next Monday.
Yes. And
then the moon moves in. There's something about, we talk about sacred geometry, and there's, to me, I've never even tried to explain this to anyone before, Lois, but it's fun to explain it to you. There's a way that the geometries of things make a grid, and with the way they move.
Yes, I remember
seeing. It's it's you look at how they are, and it's oh, there's something about that shape. It unlocks a code in the being.
Buying a little book that showed the patterns of the planets as they moved over a period of time, and the sacred geometry that they're creating. And so this cosmic dance that's continually occurring.
Yeah, how Venus is the orbit.
The orbit flower.
Yeah. Those are beautiful too. Anyway, that was my answer to what I'm paying attention to. So it's the sun, Aries, Antares, Mercury, sun, and the eclipse that's all happening in the next couple weeks. And then we move to, for here, I love that we were saying this before we started recording, that we're just us talking is cross-coding North Pole, South Pole, Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere. I said this to Lois before we started recording this. I was we're I could see how we're doing eclipse work, this solar eclipse, just you and I having this conversation of the North-South. I don't get to talk to too many people in the southern, up here north of the equator, and most of the people I talk to are up here north of the equator too. So I'm so glad you're where you are, and I get to be friends with you.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. And you were also talking about the lunar movements and the eclipses, and the South Pole and the North Pole, and it's this huge realignment, but also within us, this realignment completely. So from the lower realms to the higher realms within us.
Cool. I like that.
This complete twist around. But that it's going to be a bit bumpy, to say the least. But that this is, it's beautiful how it's been shown to us in this way. All of this information, all these.
Yeah, there's this whole thing of like the pole flip. People talk about, but it doesn't show up that way for me. Have you ever bought one of those flashlights that you don't need batteries for? You just like shake it.
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm talking about, the camping tools?
Yes.
I was like, that's what's happening to us. I feel like we're like getting powered up just by the magnetic, just by like, so like, oh, okay, we're all going to get turned on. But we're kind of being recoded as a species to be able to flip. Like that's what I've seen for like with my people. I don't like to use the word clients, but whatever the people that come see me here at Innerspace and I play with in the energy field and the light field. It's even for a while, for the last few equinoxes, I was doing treatments here where I'd move my table into a different room of my center here so that it faced north-south instead of east-west. And I would have people like lie on it north-south and then have them turn over. So like they get energy, like healing in both directions. Like we have to be bipolar, not in the way that, like the mental way, but like we really have to be able to operate in both operating systems. And that's the sun. Solar cycle 25 started this summer. And so I don't know if you know that. It's like we had solar cycle 24 when the sunspots they change their polarity, the flip. So in solar cycle 24, it was like whatever, the plus was here, the minus was here. And we'd get sunspots that were coded in this magnetic field. But then when they switched to this other solar cycle, that's how they can tell what solar cycle that we're in. The sunspots and the coronal mass ejections have the opposite magnetic coding. So that's what people have been kind of, I don't want to say wig it out, but I can't think of another, like people have been like wigging out since it's like those, and then we have that whole ripple that moves through about the solar storms are gonna, whatever they're gonna do. It's like, oh no, they're fuel. It's just, we have to be bipolar in the way that we receive both sides of the signal, and we have both spins. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. I see it as, because we're opening up to even more capabilities as well. So there is no inner limits. There's no any imbalances we're coming into balance. So that for me, it's like turning to a wholeness of being able to receive and transmit from wholeness. So there's no shades, maybe
short signals, or like when the signal, like it's like you have to operate in the full spectrum of the signal, even when it's like during the flip and during this transmission and during this. It's like I think we always like short circuit when we're about here, maybe as a species.
And also because you're opening something else up completely, which is understanding bandwidths. Huge bandwidths in frequencies, and so whatever we are resonating at that time, that's what we understand and receive. But then it will continue. It continues. So, like for example, when I was beginning on this journey of awakening, it would be the Pleiadian frequency would be a certain feel and vibration for me at that time. So I wouldn't understand it. Like I experienced a huge heart-opening experience with my first Moldavite crystal, placing it on my heart, and then boom. And, so it was this deep green feeling to the Pleiadian frequency, and then starting to understand, I was playing with coming to a place of understanding, I'm not this body, but I'm somewhere sort of floating inside this body, controlling this body. And then this fascination with all of that and sort of playing around with being this floating awareness inside this body. But then the Pleiadian has changed. The experience has changed for me now. I resonate so much more with lighter blue colours is more Pleiadian for me now. I find it fascinating, and so we can't say, it's just this or this. It's going to continually change. The bandwidths that we're playing in will continually change, and so so this, when you're doing this, is really interesting because it's
the Pleiades is the rainbow frequency. The 7 sisters are the 7, like they're all the colors. So I feel like we like clump the Pleiades in sometimes as one thing, but they're like the whole. I did write a write-up on this about the Pleiades as like the sorting hat. Did you read Harry Potter?
No.
And like how you sort into the different houses. It's like there's different soul aspects, like it's a soul family, and each of the sisters represents a different aspect of our soul. So it's like you're still coding with the Pleiades. It's like the green sister has a certain message, a certain frequency to offer you. And then the light blue sister, it's like a different chakra or a different bandwidth of same Pleiadian. But in the same way I was talking about the sun at the beginning, it's like if we took in the Pleiadian database or the knowledge, it's just like it's just beyond our human capabilities. Like we have to take it in little bits, like digestible bits. Even those bits are mind-blowing and heart-opening and field transforming, right? So it's like we take in like a little, it's kind of like meals, right? Like it's like you need like snack. It's like better to have like maybe 6 meals a day, like little meals, because you can digest them better than like here in the United States, it's Thanksgiving week. So rather than the Thanksgiving dinner with the full stuffing and potatoes, it's like maybe it's better to have like a little meal. But I feel like the star codes come like that too. Like it's like for me, they've come like piecemeal.
Absolutely, that's a beautiful way of describing it. Yes, because we integrate, and it takes time to integrate and to be able to understand.
So tell me more. So you've been having that like the blue.
So it's been more of the blue frequencies, but this deeper connection with Gaia again too, but it feels. It's just so completely different. I find it really, really fascinating. And it's not the same Pleiadian as I recognised in the beginning. And there's this also, Judith Kusel has spoken about the Pleiadians being the botanists of the planet. And Sandra Walter speaks about where certain pieces of our beautiful nature have come from, which planets they have come from. So I think she talked about the huge trees in California coming from the Pleiades or Venus. So it's just starting to feel into everything differently again and making those star connections,
Is it appropriate to say this? I guess it is. So even if you think of the Pleiades, it's a star cluster. So there's hundreds of stars, and we just talk about the 7 that are most visible. So even if we just talked about the 7 sisters, each of those stars has planets orbiting it, probably. And like how many different planets, like there's so many different exoplanets, they call them, like the ones that are outside of our. So like we have the flora and the fauna on any one of those planets in the Pleiadian star system, seeding life here. It's just like the Pleiades it's a multi-dimensional system in itself, right? So you can have like, sometimes we have these like dreams / memories / whatever, even like holographic reality, like, we can visit to these other planets in our travel states, whatever they may be, merge states, and have that familiarity of being at home, because I feel like the Pleiades for a lot of us here on Earth have like this soul home quality to them, right? Like we feel like, oh, that's like my soul is from there. But it's like, even there's no one there. It would be like saying like somebody coming to visit our solar system and being like, oh, you're from whatever they call our, they call it like sun system. It's like, oh, but like there's the Venusians, and then there's the Mars people, and then the Earth people, and then the people from Pluto, and like that all codes differently. It's just like this the vastness sometimes is just like,
it's a huge, I'm starting to recognize it as, it's a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece that is slowly unveiling, or we are coming to a remembrance of certain aspects of it, because it's huge.
And then certain things, I think, so instead of like getting overwhelmed or lost in the vastness, there's the tidbits, or the like you're on a like you're connecting puzzle pieces, or you're on you're in the forest following the trail of breadcrumbs or golden golden seeds. It's like, so it's the one that you're interacting with at the moment, like the one, the knowledge that you're supposed to be ingesting, and interacting with and interfacing with is the one that comes to you at this time. It's like there's a reason why the light blue Pleiadian qualities are coming for you now. There's like a thing for you there. And like for me, it's like, why is like the Aldebaran and the Pleiades and the Hyades and the Taurus, like for some of us get like more drawn to different, it's like people are like all about Orion, right? And it's like the Orion belt and the Orion, it's like we get drawn in, like our soul feels this like palpable connection with different things. So
absolutely,
just follow like whatever,
yes,
whatever's lighting you up the most in that moment. What's making your like your armpits get a little sweaty and you get a little like, at least I do,
Yes, because then these alignments come in. People like you, with your interpretation, bringing a new perspective onto something, and it just expands it and makes it into something really, really, really beautiful.
Well, thanks so much for letting me talk about it. So fun.
Julie,
like, this is such a fun.
I hope this is not the end. This is just the beginning. And,
I'll chat with you anytime, friend. This is
you are a treasure trove of wonderful light and wisdom and knowledge and remembrance. And so it's going to be an absolute delight. I'm excited already for the next one. And thank you so much for this share, because it's been
thank
beautiful.
Everybody who's taken the time out of their busy lives to watch this. It's like, yay. We're so happy to be here with all of you.
Thank you.